Here we go.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, now recording. Linda, can you see us?
Yeah, I was gonna click here. Is that okay?
Do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, John, you're cleared for takeoff, buddy.
Mucho gracias.
All right.
All right, so we are going to be starting on page 74, and we're going to pick up the last paragraph of the 12th letter. Actually, let's start on page 73. We'll go one page back because that's sort of the beginning of the thought. We covered the second to the last paragraph last week, but that'll give us a good running start into the last paragraph because it all relates. So we'll finish that one up and then we'll start into the 13th letter. Before I dive into the text, is there anything left over from last week that y'all want to talk about? Old unfinished business. You know, we are all recovering from something, so there's going to be some unfinished business. But not all of it should be talked about here. All right. Okay, so here we go. The 12th letter. So we'll start last on page 73, that last paragraph. Having found different methods of going to God and different practices to attain a spiritual life in several books, and just to back up a little bit, she asked him to please give her his method. And he didn't want to do it except on pain of death that she keep it secret. So he says, here's what I can tell you about it. Having found different methods of going to God and different practices to attain the spiritual life in several books, I decided that they would serve more to hinder than to facilitate me in what I was speaking, which was nothing other than a means to be wholly God's. This made me decide to give it all, to gain all. So after having given all to God in satisfaction for my sins, I began to live as if there were no one in the world but him and me. Sometimes I considered myself before him as a poor criminal at the feet of his judge. At other times, I looked on him in my heart as my Father and as my God. I love that line because I've been so buggy about macro and micro lately, right, on Sundays. And so here he is switching from macro to micro, seeing himself as the criminal at the feet of the judge under the macro law, right? And then flip side is in my heart as my Father and as my God. And that really is going to be the experience of our relationship with God. It's going to be a both and. It's going to be that constant oscillation between those two contexts. Because as we're living between heaven and earth here, we're going to be living those two contexts. And there's just no way around it. And there's no way to resolve it. That's the most important thing. You can't resolve it. It's just going to be an oscillation. And so the same thing is going to happen when we are experiencing God. Sometimes he's the king, and sometimes he's our best friend, our most intimate partner. And that experience, that oscillation is just part of it. Sooner we can make friends with that, sooner we can relax in our relationship with God. And I suppose really with everybody else, there's always going to be shifting contexts, right? He says, I adored him as often as I could. We talked about the adoration as being really awareness, and probably awareness with gratitude and awe. That experience would be the adoration. Keeping my mind in his holy presence and recalling it as often as it wandered, always pulling himself back every time he realized his mind is wandering. I had no little difficulty in this exercise, but I kept on despite all difficulties and was not worried or distressed when I was involuntarily distracted. That's one of that's kind of contemplation 101, is not to let yourself get frustrated with yourself when your mind keeps wandering. Don't worry about it. Just see it as another opportunity to come back to center, to come back to presence. The more you practice, the better it gets. And so it's another opportunity for that. But if you allow yourself to get frustrated, then you're gone. Train's leaving the station in the wrong direction. I did this during the day as often as I did it during the formal time specifically set aside for prayer. For at all times, at every hour, at every moment, even in the busiest times of my work, I banished and put away from my mind everything capable of diverting me from the thought of God. A seamless presence all the way through. That's as far as we got last week, to the best of my knowledge. So then he says, this, Reverend Mother, has been my regular practice ever since I entered religion. Though I have done so imperfectly and faint-heartedly, I have nevertheless received very great advantages from it. I know well that I have received them through the mercy and goodness of the Lord, since we can do nothing without him. I, even less than others. But keeping ourselves faithfully in his holy presence and keeping him always before us, not only hinders us from offending him and doing anything that would displease him, at least voluntarily, it also gives us a holy freedom, which allows us to ask him for the very graces we need. Finally, the effect of repeating these acts is that they become more habitual, and the presence of God becomes, as it were, more natural. Thank him, if you please, with me, for his great goodness to me and the great number of graces which he has granted to so miserable a sinner as I am, for which I can never be thankful enough. May he be praised by all. Amen. I am in your Lord, yours, etc. And this letter is undated. This is all kind of quintessential Brother Lawrence, right? This, that second sentence, I know well that I've received them, these are the graces, through the mercy and goodness of the Lord, since we can do nothing without him, I even less than others. Once again, always the display of humility, a sense of dependence, and especially a sense of non-control in Brother Lawrence that I believe is really his hallmark. He has no illusions whatsoever that he controls anything. Anything that he does well, anything that is successful, even when he goes to Burgundy to buy wine, you know, for the house. If he does well, it's because God did it through him. Because left to his own devices, he's going to mess it up. That's just his basic take in life, right? So that sense that he doesn't really control things, he's not in control, is yeah, I'm wondering if it may have been something that he grew up with, since he grew up in very poor circumstances. So maybe it's just part of his personality, either by nature or nurture, or if he developed that while he was at the monastery, it's hard to say. But at least at this point in his life, he really realizes he doesn't have control. And that is a huge piece in terms of a contemplative mind, as we have been understanding it. Keeping ourselves faithfully in his holy presence and keeping him always before us not only hinders us from offending him and doing anything that would displease him, at least voluntarily, but it also gives us a holy freedom, which allows us to ask him for the graces that we need. So this constant presence, you know, sometimes when we talk about it in terms of recovery, you know, someone has been abstinent, sober for a number of years now. And, you know, does that mean they're completely out of the woods? Okay, there's this sense that I've been abstinent, I don't have the cravings anymore. I have firmly established a new habitual way of living life that doesn't include alcohol or whatever my drug of choice was. But in the back of the mind, it's like, yeah, but that frailty is still there, right? There's always, if the circumstances were right, if the trauma were sharp enough, you know, that I could go back to old patterns. And so by keeping everything present, by staying present to self and to vulnerabilities and predilections, that's the guard against really losing our way and going back into the ditch. And I see Brother Lawrence is basically saying the same thing here. The seamless presence that he maintains is what hinders him from ever offending God, ever doing something that would displease God. And, you know, that sounds very, you know, legal to us and maybe punishable if he were to go outside of God's pleasure. But really, it's just maintaining the connection with God's will, God's deepest purpose, God's deepest desire and delight, as we understand will from the Aramaic. He stays right in the center of that if he's staying in the center and awareness, a conscious awareness of God's presence. And so it's just keeping him right in the strike zone, right in the sweet spot, right down the painted line in the center of the road. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And then he says, finally, the effect of repeating these acts is they become habitual, and the presence of God becomes just normal. It just moves into procedural memory. It moves into muscle memory. We have literally remapped the brain. So the way we look at life now includes God's presence and the awareness of it. You know, people sometimes say, you know, meditation is so hard. Mindfulness is so hard. I got to work so hard at it. Is it always going to be this hard? And it's like, no, it's not. But there's never going to be a moment that you're not actively engaged in it. There's never going to be a moment that you're not staying in balance. You know, it's just like walking upright. It's easy as falling out of bed, right? But every muscle is finely tuned to keep you in an upright position. If you ever completely relax, you're just a puddle on the floor. I like the tightrope walker image, right? We walk across that cable as easily as we walk across the room, but think about the balance that's going on every step. It'll be the same thing with contemplative practice, with mindfulness, with seamless presence. But it does get easier. It becomes natural. It's something that we now can just do. And it feels like there's no other way to do it. But it's so easy to form another habit if you just get off the beam for a little bit. Look what the pandemic did, you know, in just a short period of time, it completely rewired all of the habits of an entire nation. I mean, we are not the same country that we were before. We're not the same people that we were before. That happened inside a year, and we're feeling the effects of that. So it's something that has to be maintained, is what I'm saying. But it doesn't feel like a restriction once it becomes this natural habit that he's talking about. And I think that's where the law of liberty that James writes about in his book is what he's talking about. The law that no longer feels like restriction, it just feels like liberty because it's just what we do once it becomes written on our hearts. Thoughts? Reactions?
I want to get more now I can't say that. I want to do more of that. You know?
You can.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Do it while you're keeping your legs raised.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go.
Get
Get in your bark lounger, incline
That's
your
right.
legs and go for it.
So what are my eyes? I'm sorry.
I'm just messing with you, Linda.
Okay.
Except for the raising your legs part. You do need to do that.
So I work with them, right? Sort of.
Sorry?
So I should be working with my legs, right?
You should be keeping your legs raised as much as you can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You want them to be able to bring. But we digress.
There's something about this that's just grating me.
Oh, good. I was hoping somebody had a great.
The last sentence, even in the busiest times of my work, I banished and put away from my mind everything capable of diverting me from the thought of God. And then the further down, well, that's the first one that triggered me. I'm like, how do you focus on what your task is at hand? I mean, try telling your boss that or your client that.
Okay. Okay. I get your point.
And then
Does any go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
and I get the, I mean, I remember the verse too, pray continually, unceasingly through the day, you know, and reconciling that a little bit and keeping that balanced in my head. But some of his comments, the way he makes them, I'm like, man, if I was just a drone working on a factory line and I did the same thing day in, day out, I'd be okay with that mindset. But so many of our obligations and issues in life that are presented to us are so different than taking that mindset. And then the same thing that what triggered me was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences down in the next paragraph, since we can do nothing without him. And I'm like, clearly God's there, but so much of life is just up to us. And I sometimes I guess I feel like, well, whatever happens, we'll just roll with it. And it's like clearly you can't control outcomes, but you surely can control what you bring into life and the vibrance that you bring into what you're doing. The results are God's, but what we bring into life and the power that we have in God, I just struggle with that mindset myself.
Okay. Anybody want to react to that?
Yeah, I've struggled with that too for, when I started this journey for 2, 3, 4 years, until one lady in my support group said, I also said, oh yeah, they're telling me this is all God, as if I don't have the power to decide. You accept what is given. So this is the story she gave me, and I think I mentioned it some time ago too, when there was a flood, there was a storm, there was a hurricane, and he prays to God, oh please help me here. And then a boat came. He says, you want to come? So no, God will help me. And then there was another one, there was another thing, and then another one. Now the flood is going up. He's up on the roof. And then the helicopter came. He says, come, you're here, we'll take you away. He says, no, God is here to help me. And of course he died and drowned. So he goes to heaven and says, God, you say you're going to help me. He says, yes, didn't you see the boat I sent to you? Didn't you see the helicopter I sent to you? So I think I was also misreading this. It says, it's all in God's hands. Until this story tells me, no, we make the decisions as well. Because I was getting angry, go, what? He's doing everything. What? Don't I have the power to also direct my life? Right? So that was what I was angry about until, I think it was that lady in my support group, and also you, Dave. It doesn't mean we have no choice. We do have a choice. But you don't just sit there waiting. Oh, God will take care of this.
But the line there says we can do nothing without him.
Right. I know.
Right. So we're still taking action, but we're giving God credit for every action taken, essentially.
Yeah.
Of what we're putting into it, William?
Say again?
Are you saying what we put in it, we're giving him credit?
We're giving him credit for everything, right? Even our effort.
Because the part that I struggle with is the Dave, we've talked about this, the God's up there pulling the puppet strings.
Right.
And
I don't see it that way, right?
Well, I know that, but this smacks of that to me.
I don't hear it that way though.
Yeah.
Okay, can you explain that, William, how you do hear it?
It's I was talking to a client earlier today, and he was saying like, I forgot exactly how he was explaining it, but he was saying like God is a funnel for our awareness, right? Like it's a way of orienting ourselves through taking this extremely humble position. So even as I'm showing up and I'm doing work, none of the glory goes to me. All of the glory goes to God, and all of my efforts can only be expended because God allows it, because God energizes me essentially. So by taking no ownership of even my own labor, I can divorce myself completely from the outcome. I can divorce myself completely from credit for a job well done or criticism for failure. And I just come up and I work in a way that glorifies God in this moment.
Yeah.
Right. And allow my effort to glorify God, and whatever the outcome is will be what it is.
That's beautiful, William. Very lovingly put.
Well, that's what he said, right?
Well, it's very beautiful, but Bill, is it moving your needle?
Hmm.
Well, you know, there's a mindset of taking ownership of our responsibilities. And maybe that's where I'm coming from is, you know, we slough things off so much of the time that I observe in life that, well, that's just God's will. And we don't dig in and do the work that we have in front of us to experience the fullness that I believe God is wanting us to be able to experience.
Hmm.
And it's not in a sense that's motivated by giving ourselves credit for it. I get that, William, what you're talking about. It's not about look at me, but it's just pouring yourself into what you're doing in a sense that you just own it. You just give it everything you can.
Taking responsibility for it.
Taking responsibility for it. And if you're incorrect in something, own it and do what you need to do to purge it or start changing it.
Mhm.
But don't sit there and just say, I can't do anything about it because God's in charge.
Mm.
But I don't think that's what's going on here, Bill. You know?
Right.
Well, maybe not. I guess, Dave, when I approach my work and I sit at my desk, I practice this by saying, help me give the best I have to give here of what you've taught me, what you've been showing me, help me to apply myself as fully as I possibly can in what's in front of me. And do it in a way that's honoring to God, and let that's more, I guess, the mindset I'm saying, and leaving the result to Him.
Right.
It's
I mean,
just
I'm picturing like a Michelangelo or some great artist or something, right? Creating some work, and they're functioning from this place that this work is inspired, right? It's coming from a higher whatever, but they still got to pick up hammer and chisel.
Yeah, and I see that when I'm watching you guys playing up front on Sunday morning.
Mm.
Pouring yourself into your craft of just really getting into the zone. You're pouring yourself into it. There's passion there. There's not a passivity about it, I guess.
And if you don't take responsibility, you'll see a different performance, right? If you don't.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean you can't make skips and jots, but you're not trying to draw attention to yourself either. You don't want that, in fact, but there's something that within me, at least, that I just want to be able to walk away and feel like I've really given my best that I know how to give. And I keep trusting God to keep teaching me, blessing other people, however He wants to bless them or not through me. It's I guess, taking life a little bit more.
What I'm getting about what Bill is saying, and Bill, I think you're really hitting on something. As I see it, it's from the training that I've had is in what some of us understand as the third step prayer. And that's what this whole page discusses, in my estimation. It says that, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I could have of your power, your love, and your way of life. And may I do your will always. And then I say that prayer every morning, and then I get down, I put one foot in front of the other and let Him take care of the results.
That's the third step prayer, is that called? Third step
Mhm.
prayer?
Third step prayer. Yep. Yeah. Bill,
If the big book is on us, it's on page 63.
Thank you.
Bill, do you see yourself like when you said that you kind of offer, when you start out the day, you offer yourself to God and basically ask for his guidance and his help before you even launch into things. But do you see that, and maybe not in real time, but do you see that when you get in your zone of working with everything that you got, you know, and you're accommodating people, you're getting things done, you're meeting deadlines, you're trying to get everybody working together. Do you see that as God being in the pilot seat and giving you what you need to do that work effectively and responsibly?
That's all Bill.
I think, you know, when I reflect on this, I used to think that, Judy,
Okay.
more so. What I find myself over the last 6 months probably is the fact that, you know, uncoupling from this contract, that if I'm giving you all this effort, why aren't these results happening?
Okay. So
And
you're
that's
still want the outcome to be a certain way.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly I set out for, you know, if I sign a contract with somebody, I have to deliver on that contract exactly what I agreed to.
Mm,
But I can't always control all the construction guys that are all over the map.
right.
I at least go into it with the mindset that I'm going to do everything within my realm of control and abilities and experience, and reflecting on how can I best meet the needs that are in life facing me right at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's more the mindset that I feel like I need to keep maintaining, but it's been helpful to disconnect from the contract of, God, I'm doing all this. Why aren't I seeing any results here?
Mm,
I'm not responsible for things outside of my control that I can't control, with results that I may set off to do, but it doesn't turn out that way.
mm, mm.
Does that make sense?
Well,
I
but
think,
that's your contractor's will, not God's will, right?
yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
That's your contractor's will going astray, not God's will.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's as life is presenting itself, that's what's in front of me. You know, it's like, okay, I can't sit back and say, well, I can't, God, you've given me these skills through the years by my allowing myself to do the work and to grow in maturity as best as I can understand, and to look back at myself and say, all right, you're grabbing hold of this too hard.
Mm,
Just because you do this doesn't mean you get to expect that God is going to give you this end result. But I do have skills. I do have things that he's taught, and we all do at this point in our life. And it's passive, in my view, when we get to this stage of life and we just kind of retire and lay back and just don't apply that wisdom and knowledge and experience. The younger people may not accept it, but at least that's kind of where I'm getting at, is we're at stages of our life where, like, my God, I mean, all of what we've learned by this point, to sit back in our butt and just kind of twiddle our thumbs, to me is like,
mm,
Well, that's not what it's saying though. But see if this helps. Remember when your kids were two? All of you who have kids, remember when they were 2 years old, right? They hit this terrible cruise and they're getting all puffed up and they can say no, and they're exerting their own will, and they are thinking that they're all that because they can finally separate themselves from their parents and they can start to exert what they want to do. And you just look at them and you kind of smile because you know that you just cleaned their bottom and changed their diapers and you fed them and you do everything that is possible to keep this little person alive who thinks that they have all of this will to be able to throw around. I think it's the same sort of idea. Obviously, we have skills that we can develop or not, and we can use them in ways or not if we want to. We can be as passive or we can be as active or even aggressive as we want. But the very next breath that we take is given to us.
Right.
And the fact that we are here at all at this planet keeps spinning in absolute astonishing regularity and within certain tolerances that any of us hold place on with it at all. I think it's that dual consciousness. Yes,
Right.
I need to take responsibility for my actions. And yes, if I want anything to happen, I got to bring a shovel. But at the same time, I'm utterly dependent and vulnerable on everything that is so fundamental to life that I could never even, in the first place, need that either. That is the kind of paradox, I think, that we're in. And it is a paradox. You can't resolve it. It's going to be that oscillation back and forth again. But I think at the same time that you're working your butt off and trying to bring your contracts to fruition, you're at the same time you're realizing I'm completely dependent on everything that really matters. It's that kind. And I think that Brother Lawrence really is only reflecting Jesus when Jesus says, I don't do anything on my own initiative. Everything that I do is the Father doing it for me. It's the same thing. And yet, Jesus worked hard. And he exerted himself. And he broke truth to power. And he got killed for it. Right? So he was not passive in any way, shape, or form. Yet he was able to have those two things in his grasp.
I'd like to add something. It's more simplistic than Bill's situation. Mine is more, in healthcare with my patients. Okay. When I learned to let go, my job was more joyful. And this is what happened. Okay. So we see a lot of obese kids. And there's a lot of families, Hispanic families with a lot of diabetes and obesity in the way they eat. And I hear fatalism, meaning everybody has diabetes. I will get it too. Okay, so don't bother. Okay, I can only I have the skill to give the information. I was given the skill, I can guide. Okay, so this is now, I changed the way I approach things. I said, look, there's diabetes in your genes. There's nothing you can do about it. It's in your genes. Your mom has it, your grandma, they have amputation. Okay. However, it's your daily habits, the sedentary lifestyle, the way you eat, the way you exercise or not exercise. Okay. It used to frustrate me because to me, I find that easy. Walk 20 minutes a day. That's it. Take the stairs. Drink, 8 glasses of water. Eat your fruits and vegetables. It was easy. But there's that fatalism and the motivation sometimes isn't there. Sometimes it is there. And you go, oh, yay, bravo. I've learned to let go. It used to frustrate me. Now I'm not frustrated. To me, I say, this is on you. This 15-year-old boy, you play soccer and they're fine. The other saying, no, there's that motivation. And there's also depression going on. But there's that fatalism, which to me, until they change their attitude about it, it will. But if it doesn't, it's not mine to take. And it was easy. My work became easier when I let it go. I don't know if that helps, but that's my example.
Ellen, I think I would guess that you bring into that situation the best you are able to coach them,
Right.
sure, and encourage them, and then leave it there.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to you giving up and saying, what's the use of all this stuff?
Right.
And then you're just a drone just going through the motions.
Right. Because it became very frustrating for me for many years ago. Here they are again. Same thing. The liver enzymes is high. You need a biopsy. Same thing.
Yeah.
But until I let go, I say, this is yours. It was easier. The same too with a contractor, like Dave's saying.
Right.
If you control them, they will decide.
Right.
But yes, it used to frustrate me, that fatalism actually. Like, what? It's not that difficult to take the stairs, but maybe it is difficult for them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that helps. Oh.
But I mean, the way you handle that, I would say that glorifies God, right? It's like you're not judging the person, you're accepting them exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
It's compassion, and you're telling them, look, you're in danger. You know, you need to change, right? And So yeah, I love the way you handle that, and I
Yeah,
feel
I mean, I wasn't like this 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, I find it more enjoyable now, whereas before I was so frustrated.
Mm.
Again, your BMI now is higher? What? Look. And I know I'm learning too, I learn because this is the culture we were at in healthcare. There's that shame until I say, yes, that is shameful. And now we have eating disorders
Hmm.
because of that.
But especially in that kind of field, right? Where like in the substance abuse field, right? We're like the way it was explained to me by one of the old timers from AA is we're planting seeds,
Mhm,
and not all of those seeds are going to germinate,
mhm.
you know. But our job is to show up every day.
Yeah.
And keep going.
Um, so I hear what Bill is saying, but I don't pick up that vibe from what Brother Lawrence is saying here.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
like he starts with this orientation where you just can't go wrong, right? The extreme humility, you know, none of the credit at all comes to me. All of it goes to God. And I'm showing up each moment and doing what the situation requires. And then I go and sleep.
Mm.
Right. And I love it.
And I think the other half of that is, why are you getting up each day and doing that work? You know, if Ellen's patient is just following Ellen's rules, it's going to feel like it is like a restriction. It's going to feel like a coercion on their lives, and they're not going to like it, not going to want to do it. But if they will persist long enough, they'll get to the point where they actually look forward to and enjoy the 20-minute walk. Well, they actually like the taste of broccoli, which is hard for me to imagine, but it's possible. It can happen, right? And they actually make that. So they're not doing it, but they do only to get a result. They're doing it just because it's just part of who they are, and they love it. And now they're living the law. They're living a new lifestyle. I think it's always going to be a both and that's the hardest thing for us to kind of get ourselves wrapped around, because our minds, all they do is compare and contrast. So the mind's natural tendency is it wants to make a choice and flip down to one side or the other in that dualistic proposition. If we're going to develop a contemplative mind, it's because we are able to see things unitively and realize it is always going to feel like an oscillation between two poles. It's going to feel very different. But once you get used to that, then we're gonna love it. We're gonna love being between the horns of the paradox, because that's the alive point. That's where things are vibrating. Rather than being static on one side.
I don't know if this applies, but I'm going to share it. I had offered to make. My mom taught me this. It's an inexpensive meal. It's cabbage and potatoes and carrots and onion and broth, and you cook it all together, and I don't know what you call it, soup or whatever. Anyway, and my family, my daughter and her family really liked my cabbage soup or whatever it's called. And so Stephanie had asked me if I would make it, and I said yes, of course. And then she decided they all went somewhere and left me at the house by myself. Well, my first reaction was irritation and a little resentment. And then I thought of Brother Lawrence and doing the dishes. And I thought, okay, this is a meal that I make, that I like, that I know they like. So then I put lots of love in it. And every carrot that got cut, every potato that got cut, I put love in it. And I left it on the stove. Of course, I turned it off, but it was, ready. So they were at church and they weren't going to get home till 8:30. So when they walked in the door, there's this pot of cabbage waiting for them to eat. And we just saw my phone rang, and it was my son-in-law, and he called to tell me how special the meal was and how much they all enjoyed it. So I did something that was work. I did it to the best of my ability, but I did not attach results. They may or may not have liked it. You know, they could have gotten home and tasted it and nobody ate it. But because I turned to God and I put God in it and said, okay, God, help me let go of my resentment, help me let go of my irritation, and let me put love in this soup so that when they come home, they have a healthy meal to eat. And it worked. I mean, he called to say thank you, but I didn't put my thoughts on the results of it. It was, they're either going to like it or they're not. I put God in it, I put love in it, and hopefully they like it. Does that make sense? I mean, I did it, and it takes me almost 2 hours to make it. But I put everything into it, but when I turned it around, and didn't do it from resentment, I did it from love, it made all the difference in the world. God was with me through the whole thing. Does that make sense, Bill? Does that help at all? Okay.
And how could it not? Right?
I'm like Jesus. I like to tell stories.
Of course it's going to taste different, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's going to taste different.
Yeah.
But I want to hear Bill's response. I mean, did that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You just, within Judy or Jerry, sorry, you had to decide that I'm giving this freely. You didn't have a string attached to it. You were giving it from that loving motivation to give to them and care for them, and left it there.
Yeah.
But you gave everything you had in making it, probably.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
That's what I'm talking about, is like, you didn't attach a contract to it.
Right.
That's what I was referring to earlier. That's the learning that this young man with the round glasses is helping with over the last few years with regard to not setting God up on a contract. It's like the oldest son of the prodigal son, all ticked off because he was doing all the work, and here comes,
Yeah, exactly.
I think also
I mean, I didn't know whether it was going to be, I didn't even taste it. That's how I just did it. I didn't even taste it. I didn't even bring it. I just said, there it is, God. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll like it. Maybe they won't.
Yeah, I think it's also the expectations we set up. Same with me too. I cook for my daughter's dinner. And then, they love their chicken soup. They love their mobile tofu. I make it, and then they go out to eat with friends. I go, what? And I felt that rejection. I felt that, like, yeah, I did it for you guys. But when I let go and say, okay, I'm cooking this. If they don't want it, it's here tomorrow. I'll put some in the freezer. But it's that expectation. There's disappointment in expectations. I cannot control them anymore. When they were 5 years old, sure. Now I cannot. So I've let go of those expectations, and life became easier. But but the contract is a contract. It's binding by law, right? You could always go after them for breach of contract. So that's where your power is. But other than that.
And I know, I was just troubled by, it just seemed as though, I mean, when you said, there's a contract here, Bill, and it was almost like you took a left turn and we were wagging your finger at God for, like, why didn't this work out? I gave it everything I had. I mean, if you, because I was putting myself in the position of being accountable to other people that are expecting a certain result from you. And then with the complicated projects that you work on, you can't control all the variables. You can do your best to try to get everybody on board and working together to meet the goals that are specified. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And at the contract world, I think there's penalties that are attached, I imagine, right? Okay. And that might be human, like wagging their finger in your face, say, why didn't you do this? or there's real financial things.
That's the macro part of it.
Yeah. And being able to detach from your own personal ownership of what went wrong. I mean, there's a balancing act there too. Obviously, there's things that we can take away and learn from it. I faced a similar situation in my corporate work world when I was given everything I had to working with these senior leaders. And at one point, I got word from HR that one of the guys was recommending I get an award, which would have been a little bonus for me. But for whatever reason that I could never quite understand, that never took place. And then, several years later, other senior leaders I had some run-ins with because I was off track in my expectations of them, and I was called on the carpet. And it was I had, I think I had raised the right issues, but not in the right way. And it was, kind of a political mistake that I had made to not take this offline with the senior leader and not do it in front of his underlings, small group of people that reported to him. He was very embarrassed by what I did. And I think it cost me my job. And that was, for me, that was a huge personal blow to my ego and my sense of identity. And I could feel all of my issues, my own resentments coming up, and wanting to defend myself and justify what I had done. And didn't you see this and that? And what about, all of this? And I think at that point in my life, God was not a very close factor in my life in the way that I did my life. But now I can see that he was all over that situation in helping me learn what I needed to learn about doing things respectfully, honoring people, honoring myself, the way that I had behaved and the attitudes that I took on. And I was able to see, and it took me time to kind of work things through. And I was diligent about getting feedback, like, what did I do wrong here? And I was so fortunate to have a colleague of mine that I trusted implicitly. And boy, she gave me some very loving, critical feedback that I have never forgotten. And that didn't change the outcome at all. I still was jobless at that point in my life. But I learned so much about the goodness of things that evolved from that whole set of experiences. It matured me. It helped me confront the shame that I had in my life, the feelings of less than that I carried. I'll never get this right. I want to be successful and all of that. But it was, looking back, God was all over that. He was. I'm giving all credit to him because, he has helped me immeasurably in becoming the person that I am now. And I'm learning acceptance and not blaming him for stuff that went wrong in my life. That was partly my doing and partly the separation and the craziness of that organization. I didn't have to own all that, but I did have to own my own sense of what I could have done differently and learned from that, and then be able to forgive myself for not being able to meet the markers that I had set up for myself.
Yeah, you're saying exactly what my point is that those experiences, you learned from. You made a choice to learn from, and you had to learn the hard
Yes.
way, because it's like Rohr talks about, the suffering that we go through is when we really address things. We make a choice to address things or not, and
Yes.
to grow and to keep owning up to, I could have done this better. I learned this from this, and I'm going to
You
be
bet.
better in this situation. It's to me, that's back to the how that Dave's talking about so much of the time, is what am I bringing into it at this stage of my life? What am I learning? What am I allowing myself to learn
Yeah.
and to seek and mature in the way that God's trying to reveal to us?
Yes.
That's my point. I mean, you're taking ownership, you're addressing the things, you're showing up, you're doing the work to gain perspective. That's coming full circle back to, we can do nothing without him. The life that was thrown at you, the corporate environment, all of our corporate environment, our adult kids, little kids, whatever, they go off track and all this stuff in all these directions. But the work of showing up and owning it and learning from it and maturing isn't with an attitude of, I can't do anything without him, because he's putting us in those situations to pay attention, to learn if we want to or not.
Yes. It's always a choice.
That's the circle of my point. And the contract disconnecting the fact that, things aren't going to play out like I think they're going to.
Right.
But I think the larger point, though, is yes, we have to make choices, and yes, we have to bring the shovel. But how good is that really going to be if there's not oxygen in my lungs?
Exactly. I
Heart
mean,
beating to distribute the oxygen through my body. And so that's that double sight that I think we need to keep in mind. It's the vulnerability and dependence layered onto the personal responsibility and the work ethic. I mean,
Right.
we need to have both at the same time.
right. I agree, Dave.
And what Judy, really eloquently illustrated here is that when she was going through this ordeal, she certainly didn't feel God's presence, right?
What?
Mhm.
But in retrospect, she can see how God was involved in this empowering way. And
You're cutting out on us.
what we're trying to do in contemplation is get to the point that our consciousness and our awareness catches up to us in real time, so that
Yeah.
we are aware of God's presence even in the midst of the difficulty, so that we
Yes.
can approach them differently. It doesn't mean that they hurt any less, but they're still going to hurt us. And it doesn't mean that the consequences won't be as dire, but our resiliency will be different. Our ability to spring back and come back to center will be better if we are aware of God's presence. And to really hit your very first point, Bill, that awareness is not cognitive. We're not thinking thoughts about God, because we can't do that and do our job at the same time.
Right.
It's just this awareness without words that kind of undergirds and puts wind under our wings and keeps us moving forward. Again, it's that dual kind of action that's going on, that double sight. Keeping that, maybe you think of it as liminal space where you're aware of both
Right.
camps at the same time. That is the experience of the
Right.
contemplative mind, and it makes all the difference to me.
The oscillation. I like the word you used earlier, the oscillation between those.
Yeah.
That's the
That
liminal.
image from Sleepy Hollow, the movie Sleepy Hollow, I've said this how many times, and the little wooden medallion that had a picture of a cardinal, a bird on one side and an empty cage on the other. And it had two little holes, so you put it on the leather straps, you spin it around, and then you did this kind of action, and it caused the medallion to spin. And then it looked like the bird was inside the cage. So the two images on other sides of on opposite sides of the medallion were fused in our sight because of the motion. It feels like that. It feels like as we're oscillating back and forth, it feels like one thing, but you can never resolve the paradox at the same time. It's always both around. But it's an interesting experience once you start to get into it.
Mm.
But it makes all the difference. And then I think so many of the words of Brother Lawrence are going to hit us in a different way. How he can be talking about how he's the worst sinner and he's gum on the bottom of God's shoe, and then at the same time, God is setting this banquet for him and never lets him really fall very far. I mean, that kind of oscillation is the experience that I think we're all going to have finally get into that. I think that's what it's good. Hey, this is a good one. Thank you.
Sorry to
Bill.
dominate so much.
That's, no, this is
No,
exactly.
It was rich.
This is how I want to dig in. I know we didn't get to the next letter, but that's of less importance because if these things aren't raising your hackles at all, if they aren't pissing you off at some level, then we're not really getting there. It should be rocking the boat. It has to rock the boat, and we're really not getting it. We're not paying attention because this goes against the grain in every possible way for us as human beings. It really does. And so I'm glad that it is rocking the boat. It needs to. And then as we deal with that rocking of the boat, that's when we really start to get some places.
And
Very
Bill,
cool.
you helped me have an awareness of what I did tonight. I don't think I would have had the awareness if you hadn't brought up the conversation. So thank you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Very cool.
that's good.
All right. Letter 13 next week. It'll still be there waiting for us. It's okay.
Okay.
Scotty.
Father God, we're so grateful to be here with each other and with you, learning all these things and from shared experiences and from our own personal experiences, interacting with you and your creation. We're just grateful for all the opportunities, Lord. We ask you to continue to guide us and inspire us and direct us and keep our way straight, that we can serve each other and serve you in a way that glorifies you, Lord, and brings peace to our life and happiness and joy. Thank you, Lord, that make yourself available for such requests and for the time that we want to spend with you. I pray that as we continue to search for answers more and more, Lord, that we increase our desire to spend time with you and in your presence and learn from your ways, Lord. Thank you for your abundant love and your intention and your design for our lives. We love you, Lord. It's in your holy, precious name, Lord Jesus, we pray, we give our thanks and say our amens. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, everybody. Jerry, get to bed.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Late over there. You and William, it's late. Go to
It's
bed.
right, it's late here.
That's right.
Morning, Jerry.
Bye,
Good night. Be
guys.
good.
Thank you.
Good
All
to
right.
see you all.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks.
And good night, Jerry and Yvonne and Linda.
Okay, I'll see you
That's right.
guys.
It's late for you too, Jordana. You're on Eastern time now too, right?
It's 10:51 here, so
Oh, you're on Central Time. Okay.
yeah, so I will see you when I get back. But I'll be streaming this Sunday, so let
So
your
you'll
wife
see us
know.
on Sunday, but we won't see you.
Yeah, but let your wife know to say something because she forgot last week. So just let her say hi or something, so I know that she's there, or that I'm there, I should say. See you guys later. Bye, Linda.
Bye, Linda.